We've spent 200 plus years now telling people that the meaning in their life comes from their job. And now all of a sudden we're saying, oh, by the way, your job could be done by a machine. Yeah. The problem is it's not changing one thing. It's not like a silver bullet. Oh, just give people money and everything will be good.
If the value of labor tilts towards zero and only capital is creating value, this effectively breaks capitalism, right? Hi, Albert. Thank you for taking the time to do this podcast with me. I've been wanting to talk to you about this topic for quite a while. But before we jump into it, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. I'm a partner at a firm called UNESCO Ventures here in New York. And we invest in a very broad range of tech startups, from software to all the way to nuclear reactors. I've had a long-standing interest about the impact of digital technology on society broadly.
You got interested enough in the topic of singularity enough to actually write a book about it.
It's not really a book about the singularity. The book is really about how digital technology in a way has been misconstrued. So a lot of people have seen digital technology, people are like, computers are machines. We've had machines for a long time. There's nothing fundamentally new here. Mm-hmm. And the book basically says, no, that's very wrong. And then I try to explain why it's fundamentally different and what the profound changes are that result from that.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Your definition of singularity, which is a word you use, is slightly different, right? The marginal cost of something goes to zero.
Yes.
And I've always thought that was a wonderful thing about tech, right?
In the physical realm, in the realm of atoms, everything has a marginal cost. You know, we're sitting at a table here, making another table like that has real cost. You need to get the raw materials, you need to machine them, you need to transport the table. But let's say somebody watches this on YouTube. The extra one person watching this on YouTube, like an extra stream, is an imperceptible cost. And that is a fundamentally new phenomenon. And it has very profound implications. A lot of the way we think about economics, all those things are based on marginal cost being very significantly greater than zero. And so much like division by zero, as you approach that, you kind of get these strange explosions. And what's an example of a strange explosion? So again, using YouTube as an example, the distribution of views across videos on YouTube is not a normal distribution. It's a power law.
Yeah.
So the most watched videos have billions of views, and the least watched videos have 1 or 0 views, and the videos that get uploaded are not even watched.
Yeah.
And so you get this power law where it just sort of very high in one end and it decays very rapidly, and then there's this very long tail.
Yes.
And that kind of distribution, we didn't observe that in the physical world with physical processes. They were much more sort of bell-shaped in distribution.
And that's because of the marginal cost being...
Exactly. And a direct result of that is that in the digital realm, we have seen these very large companies that kind of dominate as well. That's also very closely related to the same idea.
Yeah. And what are your concerns about this?
When we think of computers and what they can do as just machines, then the conclusion from that is that, we've had machines all through the industrial age, we're still in the industrial age. But once we start to see computers in digital technology through the lens of zero marginal cost and through the second lens of universality, once you see those two things, then you realize, no, this is fundamentally different. And the key argument I make in the book is called The World After Capital. The key argument I make is it's as profound as when we went from the hunter-gatherer stage to the agrarian stage, and when we went from the agrarian stage to the industrial stage. And in those transitions, we changed everything. And my firm conviction, and this is really the substance of the book, is that we will need to change everything. And that this new set of technological capabilities, zero marginal cost and universality, can unlock an incredible world. So it's not so much a concern as much as a kind of appreciation that radical change is necessary. That it's necessary and that we need to embrace it instead of resist it.
Yeah. I'm gonna bring in the topic of intelligence and AI.
Yeah.
Do you see this upcoming boom in AI, or this capability that we're building in the industry now, as yet another step in this step change in this evolution of technology. Meaning, digital is one thing, but intelligence is another thing.
They're intimately linked. When you go in the kitchen in the morning and you want to make toast, you use a
Toaster,
when you make coffee, you use a
coffee.
Have you ever tried to make toast with your coffee machine?
No.
Have you ever tried to make coffee with your toaster? It just like it doesn't work. These are
Makes sense.
completely custom built machines that have a singular purpose. A computer can be providing a map 1 second, can be translating some text the next second,
Video
can be
player.
diagnosing a disease, can be playing like it's completely universal. And part of that universality is that it can basically carry out any computation that can be carried out by one of these computers. And as it turns out, a lot of what we call intelligence, which by the way, is just computation, right? So when you think about a doctor making a diagnosis, the input to this are your symptoms, and the output is some kind of differential saying, okay, it's either this or this or this, and we need this following test to decide which of those three things it is. But that's a computation. And so we have known, and I think those of us who study computer science and, we've known for a long time that there really wasn't some kind of fundamental magic about human intelligence.
We just couldn't reproduce.
And it was a funny thing because it was sort of this joke that AI is, 20 years away. It's always 20 years away, right?
Yes.
10 years away. It was always 10 years away. And then all of a sudden there wasn't. All of a sudden there was.
It was here.
And in the book, I give an analogy to this because we've had this happen before in human history. So much like we could think of artificial intelligence long before we had it, we could think of heavier than air flight. I mean, the idea of heavier than air flight, it goes back like to Greek mythology. Icarus flying too close to the sun. And they couldn't do it until the early 1900s. And then by 1960, we were in the moon in 1969, right?
That was amazing.
So, right, we just can't do it. And this is what we have in AI. Like, can't do it. And then what happens? Suddenly you get, ImageNet, you get these early things like, we can recognize images. And then you get another little breakthrough with the transformer architecture, and you just get on this complete tear. And I think this is really important to understand. These kind of changes in technology can be extremely nonlinear, and that's kind of what we're experiencing. And when something very nonlinear happens, humans are not very well equipped to deal with it because our thinking tends to be much more extrapolating smoothly from the present into the future. We don't understand these very disruptive changes.
It's both inspiring to me, but also scary.
There's a way of looking at this and being like, this is a complete threat. That's not how I look at it. We can talk about some X risks in a second, but the way I look at it is like, no, this could actually let us create an incredible, amazing world. Yeah, I could totally free us up. If we were stuck in the agrarian age, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. We would be in the fields,
we'll be
breaking our backs,
to make sure
toiling away. And what people forget is that in the agrarian age, 80+% of people were working in the fields. So that 20% could be philosophers and artists and warriors. But it was a small fraction of society that could do those other things because everybody else had to be in agriculture. And guess what? We haven't done away with agriculture because we still need to eat. But we just shrunk. Right. And so we can look at this and be like, oh my God, that's so scary. Or we could look at it like, oh, if we get this right, we're free. We're free. Like we can have machines do a lot of things that we do today. And we can still do very human things, By the way, those human things can include having a garden and gardening or planting your own food. Or
playing chess.
Or playing chess, So it's very scary because we've spent 200 plus years now telling people that the meaning in their life comes from their job. And now all of a sudden we're saying, oh, by the way, your job's going to be nowhere machine.
So everyone's going, I have no meaning.
People want meaning. They want meaning. And religion has been a great source of meaning. Now, my personal hope is that we can come up with more of a secular humanist narrative because I think religion comes with lots of problems attached to it. This technology can be great for humanity, but in order for it to be great, we need to really fundamentally rethink how a lot of stuff works. How the education system works, how the healthcare system works, how the social security system works, what the social contract even looks like. All of those things we have to fundamentally rethink.
Let me bring in the concept, a different concept of singularity, and the concept of economic singularity, where the value of labor, because of automation, the value of labor starts to tend to zero. This effectively breaks capitalism, right?
In the early innings of the industrial age, so from the late 1800s or mid 1800s, let's say, all the way to like 1970 or so, there was a very strong complementarity between capital and labor.
Yes.
If you wanted to have a machine, you had to have people operating it. And so, since every person is sort of born with one unit of labor endowment, as it were, that meant that, as more GDP was produced, some of it went to the owners of capital and some of it went to the owners of labor. And then starting in the 1970s, in many industrialized nations, certainly in the US, you start to get this decoupling.
Skew.
And in this decoupling, the returns to capital start to grow and the returns to labor kind of flatten out. And as you just said, you can sort of see that we could be entering a phase where the returns to capital continue to increase. The returns to labor really start to drop, not even grow more slowly, but just start to drop. Now, I do believe that in the longer run, there are things that we will pay other humans to do, qua their being humans. So even if a machine could do it more cheaply, we will want a human to do it.
Job titles that start with human.
Yes. Well, and so again, we can already look at what happened if we look at recorded music. Recorded music has been around for a long time, but people love going to concerts. There's something about another human performing for you in the moment that is magical. I do think the transition we're completely unprepared for.
Yes.
My wife, Gigi Danzig, and I, we have very been proponents of universal basic income as kind of the new social safety net, replacing the old kind of labor-oriented one. And so we believe we need that, as soon as possible. Milton Friedman was a proponent of a form of universal basic income through the negative income tax. It's just that we are now at this point, right? You can look at what's happening in law. We had our portfolio company summit, and one of our portfolio companies was they have very complex contracts. They have loaded all their past contract and markups into an AI. And when a new contract comes in, the AI automatically marks up the contract based on the past markups. So they've taken they spend about $500,000 in legal fees to get the past markups. And now the machine does most of the work. I mean, a lawyer just double checks it, but it's a compression. They say they're probably going to save this year, they're probably going to save $100,000 in legal expenses.
Lawyers should be scared.
It's this moment in time where, people have built their identity, they built their livelihood, their wealth on all of this. And we cannot simply say, in my mind, we can't simply say, well, tough luck, it's I think it's just a lot of what society is about is saying we need to figure out together how we can share the benefit of our advancement broadly.
So how do you think about fundamentally, if the value of labor tilts towards zero, right, and only capital is creating value? First principles wise, there's two ways you can solve this, right? You become a totally socialist organization so that capital doesn't mean anything,
right?
Or you give everyone shares of everything. They can
possibly. The fundamental question is how we distribute the benefits of this technology broadly. It's pretty clear that government owning all means of production has not worked out well as a model. So going back there doesn't seem like a very good idea. The suggestion that everybody should have some shares in this also feels problematic because it would wind up with very dilute ownership in lots of things, and it's not clear even how those things sort of produce, how that value gets distributed. Do you like pay dividends? Because, it's sort of not obvious. So this is why I'm a pretty big believer in basic income. The interesting thing about it is that all of this technology is massively deflationary.
Yes.
So, you can access like a medical diagnosis on the margin for zero cost, right? We just haven't figured out a way to make that broadly available. So one of the important things to realize is that living in the future could be very, very cheap. Then people always say, well, but look at New York City, like it's never going to be cheap. There's two, I think, mistakes in that thinking. The first is that not everyone wants to live in New York City, even though it's a great city. The reason people are drawn to cities at the moment is because that's where the jobs are. And so without basic income, you can't really be out in the countryside unless you have one of those jobs that you can do remotely. Yeah. But a lot of the job growth has been in service level jobs that you can't do remotely. So, so I think this is the first misunderstanding. And when you look at people who today are on a type of basic income, so retirees, they get a pension. So then, what do a lot of retirees do? They stop living in the big cities. They move to the country and they move to places where it's cheaper, maybe sunnier, whatever. So that's the first, I think, mistake. The second mistake is that a lot of the expensive real estate has been driven by two factors: population growth and undersupply of housing, right? So especially in the US, we've been bad at building. And so as a result, especially in certain cities, we've been bad at building. You look at cities like Austin that have built, rents have gone way down in Austin, despite Austin growing massively, but they've just also been building massively. Yeah. But if you look at population, the overall population trend is decelerating rapidly in many, many parts of the world.
Does that worry you, that people are reproducing less?
I think it'll be a very good self-correcting process, personally. So I don't share Elon Musk's sort of panic about this. Yeah. But you could easily see how actually housing could become quite cheap quite quickly. Yeah. So I'm not so worried about this idea that, basic income just doesn't work because you need to give everybody many thousands of dollars a month. It's just not true. We'll be in a transition period. So you can start with small amounts. Maybe it's, $100, $200 a month. Then you work your way up to $500, maybe $800. But it doesn't need to be many thousands of dollars. And then the second thing is, how can you finance it? Some of it is you can get rid of the rest of the social safety system. So we have all these things like food stamps, and we have Section 8 housing vouchers. These systems are very broken because if you are a recipient of these today, if you start working, they kick you out. My wife Gigi and I, we have this basic income pilot ourselves, where we're giving 128 people who are receiving $500 a month for 5 years guarantee. So what we see there is, because that money doesn't get taken away when you start to work, lots of people are starting to work. Yeah. But when you're in this other system, like, why would you work? It's totally irrational. Like, people are like, I'm going to make $500 here. I'm going to lose $500 here. Yeah. So, and by the way, that job isn't very reliable. I may lose that job a month from now. Then I'm out of the job, and then I have to reapply for food stamps, which may take 4 weeks to get back in. And I'm like,
doesn't make sense.
You can't get there from here simply by making incremental little fiddly changes with the existing social system. Yeah. We need to switch to the new system. And in switching to the new system, we need to change the tax code, and then we need to change lots of other things. The problem is, it's not changing one thing. It's not like a silver bullet. Just give people money and everything will be good. No. Yeah. You also have to change the education system. Yeah. And you just asked me, am I worried about depopulation? I think these are somewhat self-correcting processes, significant deceleration, but then as we make it in a new place, and suddenly people are like, okay, housing's affordable, I have time, because I don't need to work all the time, maybe I don't need to work at all if I don't want to, I can live here, what might be interesting to do? Maybe we should have some children. It'll be part and parcel of the adjustment that we have to go through.
I want to dive in a little bit more, because I'm very interested in your UBI experiment.
Yeah,
128 people. Tell me what you've learned from this thing. How long have you run?
Yeah, so we started it in, I think it kicked off in 21. We are learning more or less the same things that almost every pilot has learned, which is that people feel less stressed. Their mental health goes up, their physical health goes up. And then when that happens, they all of a sudden can straighten out certain things that they might not have been able to straighten out before. And that sometimes includes saying, you know what, actually, I should get my car fixed because I can afford it now. And now that I have a car, I could actually go to a job that I like, but it requires a car to get there. So all of a sudden, even though it's such a seemingly small amount, people feel so much more in control of their lives. And so that's been really amazing to see it. Many other basic income pilots have essentially found similar results.
Are there any negative results, like if people have enough from the UBI, they stay in the matrix, right?
A lot of people aren't people just going to play video games all day or scroll their feeds all day. As it turns out, that is related to some other questions that we've hinted at. So, for instance, the education system that we have today is an industrial age system. And an important aspect of that system is that it doesn't foster curiosity. You can't ask that question right now. That's not on the curriculum. Or during the industrial age, that was kind of a feature. Because you wanted people who you could pretty easily tell what to do. So it shouldn't surprise us that some people, when they now lose their job, don't bustle with creativity and don't immediately go, well, I'm curious, I want to learn this new thing. I mean, because we kind of trained them not to have that curiosity. So that's, my wife and I, we have a learning center that we've also rolled out also in the upstate city of Hudson. It's called the Spark of Hudson because we want to try and spark curiosity for people. So this is another example where you can't just change one thing. We're going to have to change how the education system works. I mean, we're also going to have to change it because kids can look up anything on ChatGPT, right? So what exactly should we be doing, right? And so we're going to have to change it anyhow.
Yes.
And then the other point about kind of this addiction to devices is that there is a real control issue that has to do with two factors that I also talk about in the book. And I call them informational freedom and psychological freedom. So one of the first things is, let's start with the psychological freedom. In our ancestral environment, when you saw a cat, that was a cat. And this is why, to this day, when there's sort of an unexpected noise, we have a chuck reflex, because usually an unexpected noise meant danger.
Tiger.
And so the problem is now I can present you with this sort of infinity of cat pictures via the internet. If you're not really in control of your brain, you may get addicted to a feed. I mean, I have a sticker on my phone. Scrolling kills, right? Our kind of prehistoric environment and what we kind of carry with us in our brain makes us maladapted for this environment. It's not dissimilar from sweets, right? So again, in the ancestral environment, if something was sweet, it meant it contained a lot of sugar, which meant it was very nutritious. Now, food companies have added sugar or sweetener to everything, and so we consume too much of it. So step one is we need to own that, each of one of us individually, and sort of say, what's my own practice? Is it meditation? Is it running? Is it, for me, the one that works for me is sort of conscious breathing. What is it that I do so that I'm less susceptible to all this intentional manipulation? Then the second thing is there's a weird situation in the world. And the weird situation is that each one of us carries around in their pocket an absolute supercomputer. And yet, the second I hit one of the app icons on here, the supercomputer gets completely taken over by this app. So once I hit the X, let's say X, I'm on the feed, right? I can't program this feed. The X programs this feed for me, even though I have a supercomputer in my pocket. And this
that's nuts.
It's true for all the devices around us. It's very hard for us to program them, but it's particularly hard for us to program the phones. And so another change that I've been advocating for 10 plus years is what I now call sort of a human right to my own AI. Or sometimes I call it the right to a bot. So I think we each need to have our right to an AI that we control. If you're not a programmer, you're not going to write this yourself, but somebody will write it for you. Yeah. But it will work for you. It won't be working for Google or for your bank or for the government. It works for you. Yeah. And that AI needs to be able to represent me. So Facebook cannot say, oh, no, you, Albert, have to log in yourself. I'm not allowing your AI to log in.
Yeah.
No. My right is to be, if I want my AI to log in, my AI can log in. I need to be able to delegate this completely.
Yeah.
And that is a big legislative change that we have to make. It's a big deal.
It goes back to philosophy and ethics. Mm-hmm. Are you an extractor or are you an empowerer? This kind.
Yeah.
If you use a human being as a means to achieve your ends, you're an extractor. Otherwise, if you help a human being to his or her ends, then you are an empowerer.
Yeah.
So the problem for tech to date is most of what we can do with technology is build extractive business models, right? It's been really, really challenging to find anyone that's got a business model that's much more empowering and extractive. The reason I'm excited about AI is because you can start talking to people, finding out what they want,
sure,
etc. AI, and you can start building your models to be much more empowering. Behind every social media is something I call the feed flow AI, right?
Sure.
The next thing and the next thing and the next thing. If you ask a simple question, how do they optimize this thing?
It's optimized to grab as much of our attention as they can possibly get.
Yeah. To generate this revenue.
Yeah.
So what's to stop businesses to figure out business models where the feed flow AI is actually optimized for your education, for your health, or your mental?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely have invested in some of those businesses, right? Duolingo is a subscription model. Now they do have some ads also, but a lot of their revenues are subscription revenues, and subscription revenue is a lot more aligned with
empowering
and more empowering. We just recently announced an investment in a company called Doctronic, and Doctronic is, diagnosis, and their revenue model will almost certainly also be a type of subscription or a transaction when you need it, when you actually need it. But I'm not sure it solves the problem of the programmability of third-party systems, because I just don't think Facebook is going away. I don't think Amazon is going away. And your bank's not going away. The government's not going away. These systems, and so another way to state my view is like every system must have an API. And I must be able to access the system through my own. But we're big believers in more aligned business models. Even when you look at the history of Twitter and then X, we were the first investors, so we came in at a low valuation, and we really tried hard to get Twitter to see itself as kind of a network of networks, and to really enable lots of third-party platforms. But then the company raised ever more money at ever higher valuations. And all of a sudden they were like, oh, we can't allow these third-party clients because they're stealing our ad revenue, they're stealing the attention, and so forth. They had to lock everything down. Same happened with Facebook. They open up the platform and then they're like, oh, we don't like it, and they lock everything back down. One of the reasons we've done so much in crypto is because one way to think of a smart contract is a permissionless API. Yeah. So unlike Twitter's API, where they can just take away your API key and then you're done, any smart contract once it's deployed, anybody can interact.
Yes.
This type of future where things are programmable. It still means, though, that the legacy systems, which are very large, whether it's Instagram, like the regulators still look at this through this industrial lens. They're like, oh, well, we have to unbundle it. To unbundle WhatsApp and Instagram. We're like, WhatsApp is huge by itself. Yeah. Instagram is huge by itself. Yeah. Like, they still have all the network effects. So that's why this sort of right to an API, right to my own AI, however we want to call it, to me feels very essential.
Today you have AIs that can effectively, get on the UI and read everything and make use of the apps.
It's really kind of broken. Most of those only work on your computer and don't work on your phone. Right. And for many people in the world, the phone is a computer. Yes. And for many of us, most of our interactions are on our phones, even if we have a computer. So this needs to be this needs to be addressed. It's a foundational issue.
I'm having a tough time trying to figure out how to tell the companies that they have to do this.
For having well-functioning societies require government. Now, I think you can have government that's too big
or too small.
You can also have government that's incompetent, like having small, highly capable government that focuses on key issues is something that we need to relearn because we've kind of forgotten that. So at least we've forgotten it in many Western places.
Yeah. Bureaucracies tend to keep growing and we end up with huge things. Let's go back to the changes that need to happen in the education system, in the tax UBI system. My biggest worry around the changes that have to be made is that democracies are not very good platforms for systemic changes.
This is certainly the view that leads some people to be like, oh, we need a monarchy again, or a single party that rules all. So we have narrowed our view to democracy that every couple of years you make a little check mark on a piece of paper. But there are other democratic forms that are very powerful when you need more substantial change. Like, how did the United States form? Well, it formed through, first, obviously starting with a revolution, a declaration of independence, and then a constitution. There was a constitutional convention. There's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do a constitutional convention again, and why we couldn't say, we're going to send delegates from states, and they're going to get together, and they're going to, make more drastic change. That's entirely possible. At a smaller scale, there's this idea of so-called citizens' assemblies. So a great example of that is Ireland. Ireland couldn't figure out an abortion policy for many years. The parties were just like at loggerheads. And then they randomly selected some citizens. They put the citizens together with some experts. And the citizens plus experts came up with a law. And that became the law of the land. So we have other democratic means when we need more drastic change. It's just that we seem to have forgotten about them, and we seem to have reduced ourselves to this idea of voting. And I understand why fewer and fewer people have voted in the US, because more people are like, it doesn't really seem to make a difference. I also understand why people voted for Trump, because I think quite a few of the people who voted for Trump are just going to blow it all up. And you know what? At this point, that's better than repeating the same thing. So I disagree with that view, but I understand it.
I think the default good scenario doesn't turn out very well.
What do you mean by that?
So the default good scenario, not just for this country, but for many countries, is that the country would not prepare for this, and then very suddenly they go, half the population can't work.
Sure.
And then the big man has to take over.
I'm very optimistic about where we can get. I'm somewhat pessimistic about how we're going to get there. I mean, the whole reason I've written the book, the reason I go on podcasts, the reason I give talks, my book just came out in Germany, so I went to Germany. My book's going to come out in China. I'm going to go to China. It's because I think that not enough people have understood just how big the changes that we need and how good it could be if we get it right. And so, yes, you're right. We're on a default path that's not a very good path.
Well, what are your thoughts about how to get people thinking about this in such a way that governments start to move towards a solution?
The latest thing I've been trying out, and that seems to resonate with a lot of people, is I say we need to have a Star Trek vision. Because if you go back to the late 60s, when the original Star Trek series came out, like 67, 68, 69, it was kind of a beautiful vision of the future. Like people of all ethnic backgrounds working together, men and women working together, basically unlimited energy, on-demand manufacturing. AI, talking to the computer, diagnosis and instantly fix disease. And the reality is we have the beginnings of all of that, I mean, between solar and nuclear, we could have basically unlimited energy. Incredible new unlocks in medicine. I just read that the first baby was just cured of a, otherwise deadly disease. That's a single, code flip through a gene therapy, right? I mean, completely cured. We're at this incredible moment, but somehow in the intervening years, we've gone from this kind of positive vision of the future to all these dystopias. So part of this is coming up with the right memes, because memes are how ideas travel today. And so I'm going to encourage you and everybody else I talk to try and generate some more sort of Star Trek based ideas.
So what the future can be. Are you doing anything on the political front along these lines?
Well,
or if you could, what would you?
no, I mean, so a lot of our projects, like, Basic Income Pilot, in a way is a political project, right? Because it shows to people what a future with basic income could look like, and it makes it more tangible for people. All of a sudden, they know somebody in their life who receives this. They're like, oh, this is actually an interesting idea. So these aren't just somehow scientific projects. In a way, they're very much political projects. I use every opportunity I have to speak with politicians to talk about the need for more dramatic change. In a way, what we do as investors here also is invest in things that are part of the kind of future that we want to see. But there's more to be done. I'm eager to do more.
I really, really think about this a lot. And the solutions are much less obvious than engineering problems.
Yes, but they're exciting.
What is waiting for us beyond that change is incredible. It's abundance. It's
incredible.
Exploration.
Yes,
it's everything.
It's space, the final frontier.
Yes, it is. On that very positive note, Albert, thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure. Great talking to you.
Thank you.